I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Donald Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, just lashed out against the Special Counsel Jack Smith, who was just appointed by Attorney General Merrick Garland to investigate Donald Trump's criminal conduct. Let me show you the interview where Alina Habba says, "I would be so proud to go after this all by myself." Play this clip.
Again in 24. I can tell you that I would be proud to go after all of this myself. It is not, they don't pick people that aren't on their side, okay? It is no coincidence that Hunter Biden's laptop from hell is being now exposed because we take over the House. They're going to put people that are on their side. They may try and make it look impartial, but we're dealing with this on so many fronts. And I understand the panic, but it's really, truly something we deal with every single day. It's no different than Letitia. It's no different than when Merrick Garland was involved. Just because he's a candidate now, they'd like to appear to be impartial by putting one of their buddies up as, a special counsel. It's the same thing. I want to say to the American public, as somebody who's intimately related, when they're so afraid of somebody taking over control because they're so strong, they attack them harder. When I first became his attorney, they attacked me in the media.
Well, I really hope you do this all by yourself. I'm rooting for you. I think that would be a wonderful idea because you've got the greatest history of losing in every single case that you touch. You are literally the worst lawyer, not just in the country, but in the world. We want to talk about what your statement was. First off, saying that you want to go at this all by yourself. I don't know if that's a subtle threat at the special counsel, but we'll move past that for a second. Let's talk about where you mentioned New York Attorney General Letitia James. You realize that you have lost literally every single motion and court appearance before New York Attorney General Letitia James, that Donald Trump was held in contempt and had to pay a six-figure penalty based on your quote-unquote lawyering, that in fact, you don't really even do the arguments in court. Trump has to bring in another lawyer, Christopher Kise, to make the arguments because you're not even experienced enough to actually handle important oral arguments in the courtroom. And so you mentioned New York Attorney General Letitia James. The last time I checked, New York Attorney General Letitia James didn't just bring a $250 million fraud lawsuit against Donald Trump, the Trump Organization, and his adult children, but she recently just prevailed before the special master at a preliminary injunction hearing whereby an independent monitor, retired Judge Barbara Jones, is now the independent monitor. Shall I just read from the order granting the preliminary injunction written by Judge Arthur Engoron? Because you wanted to mention the New York Attorney General matter. So let's talk about what Judge Engoron said. Judge Engoron stated the following. Engoron said, "In the absence of an injunction and given defendants, Trump's demonstrated propensity to engage in persistent fraud, failure to grant an injunction could result in extreme prejudice to the people of New York." And then he goes on to say, further, given the persistent misrepresentations throughout every one of Mr. Trump's statement of financial conditions between 2011 and 2021, the court finds that the appointment of an independent monitor is the most prudent and narrowly tailored mechanism to ensure that there is no further fraud or illegality that violates New York law. That order was just a few weeks back, and then just recently the independent monitor was appointed, where on or before November 30th, 2022, Trump shall provide the independent monitor, Judge Barbara Jones, with a full and accurate description of the corporate structure of the Trump Organization, its subsidiaries, and all other affiliates, including all trusts and their their significant liquid and illiquid assets, and Trump shall provide to the monitor no more than 5 business days after her request any financial statement, including any statement of financial condition, other asset valuation disclosure, or other financial disclosure to any person or entities, including without limitation lenders, insurers, or other financial institution, or taxing authorities, and 2, any non-privileged document, book record, or other information bearing on any of the foregoing, or reasonably necessary to assess the accuracy of any representation, and defendants shall comply with all reasonable requests by the monitor for such information. It goes on to say that Donald Trump shall pay for all of this, and that the independent monitor, Judge Barbara Jones, is authorized to utilize other professionals within her law firm, as well as outside accountants or other professionals as reasonably necessary. So go on. Tell me about New York Attorney General Letitia James. Oh, and by the way, you sued New York Attorney General Letitia James in Florida State Court. That was removed to Florida Federal Court recently. And guess what judge that was assigned to? Part of your brilliant legal strategy, I suppose. Judge Donald Middlebrooks, who recently sanctioned you $50,000 in the first of many sanctions motions against you for filing a frivolous lawsuit against Hillary Clinton and about 29 other individuals, alleging that they harmed Donald Trump's reputation through a racketeering conspiracy relating to Russia in 2016, where all of the claims were time barred under the statute of limitations. And as the judge stated, it was basically the rantings and ravings of a lunatic masquerading as a lawsuit. And this is what Judge Middlebrooks said in that other lawsuit where you were sanctioned. And again, you have about $1 million in other sanctions motions pending, which I'm looking forward to. But Judge Middlebrooks said this about your lawsuit: every claim was frivolous, most barred by settled, well-established existing law. These were political grievances masquerading as legal claims. This cannot be attributed to incompetent lawyering. It was a deliberate use of the judicial system to pursue a political agenda. And Judge Middlebrooks goes on to say that he's considering referring you to the state bar for disciplinary proceedings. This is what Judge Middlebrooks said there. He goes, "So who is responsible for this case and others like it? The rule of law is undermined by the toxic combination of political fundraising with legal fees paid by political action committees, reckless and factually untrue statements by lawyers at rallies and in the media, and efforts to advance a political narrative through lawsuits without factual basis or any cognizable legal theory. Lawyers enabling this behavior, and I am pessimistic that Rule 11 can effectively stem this alone. Aspects may be beyond the purview of the judiciary, requiring attention of the bar and disciplinary authorities. Additional sanctions may be appropriate, but legal filings like those at issue here should be sanctioned under Rule 11, both to penalize this conduct and deter similar conduct by these lawyers and others." So your brilliant strategy to sue Letitia James in Florida State Court is now removed to that same judge who just sanctioned you for filing a previous frivolous lawsuit. And as hard as this is for me to fathom, your case against Letitia James is even more frivolous than your racketeering lawsuit. And then, of course, you went on radical right media and you said, in response to the January 6th committee's subpoena for Donald Trump's deposition, you said, quote, "Trump has nothing to hide, and he has no issues being subpoenaed and answering questions about what happened that day, and he should show up and have his deposition taken." Remember that clip, Alina Habba? Play the video.
He's got a couple options here. He can ignore the subpoena and maybe run into a Bannon world, or he can go and plead the fifth, or he can go and testify Any idea what you think he's going to do, and what would you recommend?
I would recommend that he cooperate, because when you have nothing to hide, that's what I always recommend. The same reason that he always comes out and speaks on any of my cases. He has no issue being deposed, even though the left-wing media would like to pretend that he does. He has no issue being subpoenaed and answering questions about what happened that day, and he shouldn't. What he did was very public, and it was really nothing other than to say to go out peacefully, as we know.
Yeah, I sure remember that clip. I remember when you said that, but with you, it's all lies. Literally everything you say, it seems to be a lie and complete gaslighting and complete performative nonsense into the gutter, because Donald Trump didn't show up at the January 6th committee. He's a coward. He is an absolute and utter coward. Remember what happened with New York Attorney General Letitia James? That's how you took it head on when Letitia James deposed Donald Trump and asked him the most basic questions. What's the valuation of Mar-a-Lago? What's the valuation of Trump Tower? What's the valuation of the triplex in Trump Tower? What's the valuation of this apartment complex? What's the valuation of Bedminster? Why is the valuation different than the appraisal? What is the appraisal? Very basic questions. You know what Donald Trump did? You know what that little coward did? I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. He wouldn't answer a single one of those questions. And the New York judge said, in response to the preliminary injunction motion filed by New York Attorney General Letitia James, that you and Trump offer not an iota, the exact words of Judge Arthur Engeron, not an iota of evidence. You didn't put any evidence. No expert declarations, no statements from people who work at the Trump organizations. You offered zero evidence whatsoever. And like what happened in the New York Attorney General lawsuit, what's going on with the January 6th committee subpoena? Running away from it. Donald Trump wants nothing to do with it. Filed another lawsuit, because that's all you know how to do, is file these frivolous lawsuits and try to hide like the little coward Donald Trump is, and frankly that you are. He filed a lawsuit saying, oh, as a former president, there's no precedent whatsoever for a president having to testify before the January 6th committee or before any congressional committees. Well, frankly, there's no precedent, number one, to a former president having been involved in an insurrection. And it was the first time in our history that the transfer of power was challenged and that we had a former president try to overthrow our government in a coup. So there's that. But more significantly, there's a ton of precedent for former presidents testifying before congressional committees. And as former President Teddy Roosevelt said, when you're a former president, you're just but an average citizen. And he said it would be an honor to have to testify before Congress, and it is the duty of a citizen to do so. But Trump isn't duty bound, doesn't feel duty bound to anything other than to his attempts to overthrow our democracy, to run away from the truth, and to hide like the coward that he is. But I sincerely hope, Alina Habba, although I know you're not a good enough lawyer for this ever to actually, your advice to really be taken, but please go after this all by yourself. I would love nothing more to see Jack Smith for the special counsel's office versus Alina Habba. Please, please let that happen. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers. Thanks to your support. Hit subscribe. Also, consider becoming a patron of the MeidasTouch Network. Go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There's lots of great exclusive content that you could only get at our Patreon website. But most importantly, we're not funded by any outside investors, so we rely entirely on your support. So if you can, do your best, please. No worries if you can't. I understand there's lots of subscriptions out there, and if you can't, no worries. But if you can, wherever you are in the world, it goes a long way to build this independent platform and community. Patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Patreon.com/MeidasTouch. I'm Ben Meiselas. Until next time.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.